Hello. Okay, so my name is Professor Francis, and this is our HESI review. We're going to be working on this problem here. It says for the math section of the HESI, we're going to be working on this problem here. Here the question asks, it says in 18 hours, right, there are 42 trains that pass near Emma's house. And they want to know how many trains passed near her house in 12 hours. So let's go ahead to the whiteboard and do this problem. Okay. So I have a little prep information here for us, and just to kind of show how to approach the problem. Right. So our question is here, right? And this has to do with proportions, ratios, and fractions, right? Because we're dealing with, it's telling us that 18 hours, in 18 hours, 42 trains come. So that's a ratio or proportion, right? Oh, and it can be, and those ratios and fractions and proportions are all the same thing written in different forms, right? So we can write this 18 hours and 42 trains as a fraction, right? And actually, we have to do that in order to solve the problem, right? So it says 42 trains in 18 hours. So they're giving us right here. We write 42 trains and over 18 hours. Okay, and they want to know how many passed in 12 hours. Right, so how do we solve this problem? Well, let's look at a simpler example, right? And just to understand the concept of how we approach it, because this problem is really easy to solve, but I want to explain the idea behind how we solve it, not just do a arithmetic and then, uh, you're wondering when you get another problem, you're trying to figure out, well, how does it work? So this is how it works. Let's say, for example, right, and this is our example here. I wrote 12 balls. We get 12 balls that pass by in 6 hours, right? And we want to know how many balls pass by in 2 hours, right? So how do we figure this out? Well, we use the ratio that we know, 12 balls in 6 hours, to figure out how many balls per hour, like how many per hour pass, right? And it's real simple to do that. It's written as a fraction, and the fraction is a division problem. So we simply do the division, right? We have 12 over 6. So 12 divided by 6 gives us 2, right? So this is going to be, and the units here are balls and hours. So there's going to be 2 balls per 1 hour, right? That's what this is ratio represents. This 12 over 6 represents 2 balls in 1 hour, right? So now we know that the rate at which balls are passing, if 12 balls are passing 6 hours, they're passing at an hourly rate of 2 per hour, right? So now let's think about this. So if they're passing 2 balls every hour, how if we write a table, let's see this table over here, right? And we want to know how many balls pass in 2 hours, we can simply say, okay, fine, make a table. Say in 1 hour, we know 2 balls are going to pass because that's what we have here. And in the next hour, another 2 balls are going to pass, right? So if we add them up, that's 2 hours. As you can see here, we added them up, right? That's 2 hours. And we add up how many balls are passing at time. 2 balls the first hour, 2 balls the second hour. So that makes 4 balls in 2 hours, right? Now that's kind of like a picture of a graphical way to do it, right? But we can do this problem a lot simpler, right? Simply realizing that the original fraction 12 balls per 6 hours gave us the ratio 2 balls per hour, right? So this represents how many balls, this 12 over 6 represents how many balls pass per hour, right? So all we really need to do is we just like you see here in the table, right? If we know how many balls pass per hour, we just uh, add them up, right? Or we can just multiply it. If it's 1 hour, we can if we 1 hour, we can multiply it by 2 to figure out how many pass in 2 hours. So that's what we're gonna do. This ratio, 12 balls over 6 hours, is telling us how many balls pass per hour, right? 2 balls per hour. So we want to know how many balls pass in 2 hours. We simply multiply it by 2. So we're gonna multiply 12 balls by 6 hours, right? I'm sorry, 12 balls by 2 hours. And we already know the answer. The answer is going to be 4 hours because we did it in the table. I mean, sorry, 4 balls because we did it in the table. But let's see if this works. If all we had to do, if we have a ratio, right, is multiply it by how many hours we want to know, we're interested in, and we can get the right answer, then we can use the same technique to solve the train problem, right? So they tell us 12 balls in 6 hours, right? We want to know how many pass in two. We know that this ratio, 12 over 6, represents how many balls per hour, right? So all we have to do is multiply this ratio, 12 over 6, by the number of hours we're interested in. So we want to know how many pass in two. We multiply this by 2. Now, when we multiply in fractions, we have to always make sure that all the numbers are in fractions. So we simply put a 1 underneath the 2. And we carry out the multiplication, and we get 12 times 2, right? It's going to be uh, 24. Right. Now remember from our conversions that we look in the top and bottom of the fractions and units cancel out like numbers. So we have them matching units in the top and the bottom. Those are going to cancel out, right? So here we have in the top, we have hours, in the bottom we have hours. So this hour down here cancels out with that hour up there, right? So all we're left with is balls. So we multiply 12 balls times 2, we get 24 balls, right? And then in the bottom, we have 6. All we have left is 6 and a 1. So 6 times 1 is 6, right? And then that equals, and we just simply carry out the math. 24 divided by 6 is going to give us 4 balls, okay? And that's exactly the same answer we got when we did it in the table. We got 4 balls. So all we really need to realize is that whatever number the ratio they give us in the problem, right? Let's say this problem, for our example, said 12 balls in 6 hours. That represents how many balls pass in 1 hour, right? So we don't have to do any conversions. We just simply, if they want to know how many balls pass in 2 hours, we simply multiply that ratio by the number of hours. So here, in this case, we'll know how many pass in two. We multiply by 2. If it was 3 hours we're interested, we multiply by 3. Okay. And that's how and we would get the right answer. Right. So now let's go to our original problem, right? And see what ratio that they gave us. They said 42 trains pass in 18 hours. So the ratio is 42 trains over 18. And they want to know how many trains pass in 12 hours. So we're interested in 12 hours now. So we do the same thing. We just simply multiply this ratio, right, by 12. Why? Because remember, the ratio tells us how many trains are going to pass per hour. We don't need to calculate it. We just have to understand that that's what it shows us, right? So we go ahead and multiply this by how many hours we're interested in? 12 hours. Oh, it's a horrible 2. Let me fix that too. Okay. So go ahead and multiply this by 12 hours, right? Now remember, when we're dealing with fractions, well, let me get rid of our previous example. So we have some space here. Okay, so remember we're dealing with fractions. We're gonna both numbers have to be in fractional format, so we're just gonna put a 1 under our 12 hours. And there we have it. Okay, so now remember, I'm gonna write this as a note. This ratio tells us how many trains per hour. If we simplify it, we would see how many trains per hour. We're not gonna we don't have to simplify it to figure it out. How many trains? I'll just put how many per hour. Right. That's what it represents. All right. So now we're going to go ahead. We want to know how many will pass in 12 hours, right? So we multiply our ratio by 12 and we do the math. Now remember, the units will cancel. We have trains, we have hours, right? So the units will cancel out like numbers. So whatever, if you have a matching pair at the top and bottom, they cancel out. So we have hours in the top here, we have hours in the bottom here. Those cancel out. And what we're left with, uh, we just multiply the number straight across. All right, so on the top, we have 42 times 12. That gives us 504. So we have 504 trains. We have to remember to carry the units of trains over. And in the bottom, we have all we have left is 18. So 18 times 1 is 18. And now we go ahead and simplify this. It's going to be 504 divided by 18. That's going to give us 24 trains. I'm sorry, 28 trains, right? In that 12-hour period that we were interested in. So our answer is going to be 28. Okay. Now, a little note. There are a lot of different ways. We're actually arithmetic wise, we're multiplying two fractions, right? And there's a lot of different ways that we could have multiplied this. We could have simplified the numbers first before we multiplied them out, but I didn't want to get mixed up in multiple techniques, right? I just wanted to show the concept here, right? So if you want to reduce these numbers, which you can't obviously because they're all even, before you multiply, right, you're going to get the same answer. So you can do that and you're just going to get the same answer. So don't think that you can't do that. You can. Just that I wanted to illustrate the concept of solving the question, not so much reducing and all that other stuff, right? We'll leave that for another. So I'll recap what we've done, right? We realize that uh, we're dealing with this is a proportions, ratio, fraction type problem, right? All of those are just different forms of the same thing, okay? And we looked at the problem and says we have in 18 hours, 40 trains passed. So we wrote that as a fraction, right? So 42 trains pass in 18 hours. So we put the 42 on top, 18 on the bottom. Now we have a ratio that represents how many trains pass per hour, right? So now that we know this ratio represents how many trains pass per hour, and the question asks us how many pass in 12 hours. So we simply multiply this ratio by 12, right? And when we do that, we count the math, we find out that it's going to be 28 trains per hour, right? So I hope this explains things and kind of works things out, right? I sent the response, right? You guys will be able to respond to me through the email about this if you'd like, right? So have a great day.